Hello, I'm Mishka, and this channel is the Helsinki Renaissance, where we will be talking about arts and culture, and hopefully the most Renaissance man-like manner which arts and culture has ever been discussed. At least that's the plan. Now, one viewer asked me in a comment to discuss this recent tendency of various online streaming services stealing some filmmakers into their ranks, into abandoning trying to release something through cinema and instead to add footage to the libraries of various streaming services. So what do I think about this trend in contemporary cinema? Well, I don't really think anything of it, but I can talk about it a little. So, David Lynch some years ago seemed to think that platforms like Netflix probably can become the future art house theater replacements, in that it's on some level just so much easier doing the provisioning of if a company has essentially pre-sold a large quantity of tickets in the form of the subscriptions. And the reason why they're delivering on new products is that they wish to prevent people from canceling their subscriptions. So if you can essentially guarantee ticket sales in this metaphor, then obviously an art house theater that in no way can guarantee sales is more of a risk investment compared to the kind of subscription platforms. And I think everyone in Hollywood has seen that this kind of platform is starting to make certain kind of business sense, which is why so many people in Hollywood are in a mad rush to establish their own streaming services. There's Paramount Plus and Disney Plus and I don't know whether the CBS All Access. I don't know whether that's staying on or not. I'm sure there are some other, what was it, HBO Max or something like that was, I think, coming, and I don't know. All kinds of Hollywood operators want their own streaming platforms because the financial, the comparatively greater level of financial security in the subscription service model seems to be one that the industry collectively on some fronts is gravitating towards. And so if there is this kind of a initial phase that lots of platforms want to build up their libraries of the streaming services, then there is some sort of an initial boom period where there are greater investments, because to launch a platform you sort of need to over-invest in it. So there's the old adage that to make money you gotta spend money. So lots of people are in this initial window, lots of people are spending more money than they probably will spend in the future, which is why there is this kind of initial rush to provide all kinds of shows to the services. So whatever happens in this initial window isn't necessarily indicative of where the scene will be deep into the future, but in all likelihood, those streaming services are probably there to stay. Now, obviously, an individual person is unlikely to be subscribed to something like 7 different streaming services simultaneously. So, whether all can find audiences and whether all can reach some levels of success is a different story, but certainly some of those competitors to Netflix and Amazon Prime, some of them are likely to reach success. Now, that's the industry side. Then what it is that I think about the kind of situation to do with the filmmakers? Well, I'll be honest, when Netflix came out, I didn't pay any real attention to it. I didn't care about any of the hype to do with some of those shows. Then gradually I watched some of them, and only recently I watched most of the big ones associated with them. Now, what do I think about filmmakers switching from the 2-hour storytelling format into the either TV series or miniseries format? Well, I think at the end of the day, the difference is kind of negligible. So, I'm not like Quentin Tarantino or Christopher Nolan or Martin Scorsese or some of these other directors who think that there's something about the cinema-going experience that must be preserved by all costs. So I don't think that a film released in the theaters is automatically the greatest kind of visual storytelling. I mean, I wouldn't particularly care to watch David Lynch's Twin Peaks in a film theater. I can enjoy it in perfectly maximal seeming fashion at home. And something like Netflix's Stranger Things, I don't think it would have been elevated into any greater level of storytelling would I have watched it in the cinemas. So I'm not one of those Tarantino or Christopher Nolan type cineast individuals who think that the cinema going thing is that's the only road for doing the best kind of visual storytelling. So I would say that there doesn't need to be any reason to think that if you take an individual like Oscar Wilde or Anton Chekhov, there isn't any reason to think that Wilde's plays are somehow higher than his novel, or vice versa, that Chekhov's short stories are better than his plays, or vice versa, and that just like writers can switch between the, let's call it, 2-hour storytelling model of the theater, which I'm equating cinema with, or the more longer form storytelling, which I'm equating television for. So I don't think there's much difference in artistry between a Chekhov play and a Chekhov short story. Now, I personally think more highly of the plays than the short stories, but perhaps that's just my personal view. I'm not saying that the short stories are less well written. I would just rather, I'm not the biggest fan of Chekhov plays, but certainly they seem more significant to me. The short stories, they're just something that I sort of take or leave, and mostly just leave. Some of the plays I like on some level. and at any rate, they sort of made a bigger impact, I guess. But anyway, so I wouldn't particularly care to create any kind of peer pressure like incentives in the kind of art form that would be like how the academicians of old acted, in that they created this kind of hierarchy of genres and thought that the greatest talents are to do this, and that, and then the secondary talents are to do, or secondary talents may do this or that, and then the worst of the worst will, they'll do whatever it is that they do at the bottom of the totem pile. I'm fine with artists gravitating towards whatever form of storytelling, be it network TV shows, be it streaming service shows or movies. I honestly don't have any real preference for it, in that I think there are more great movies than there are TV shows. But if I would if I would draw a parallel or an analogy with classical music, now somebody like Frédéric Chopin, he didn't acclimatize to the kind of scene that elevated symphonies and operas above all others, in that I would dare suspect that if Chopin had composed a symphony, I don't think it would be regarded as highly as the symphonies of those who tend to specialize in them. So I think Chopin did the right thing in not writing a symphony. The composers who don't specialize in operas, such as Beethoven, when he does an opera like Fidelio, because he didn't specialize in operas, I mean, it's not that Fidelio is unappreciated, but it's not really among the... It's only barely even in the second tier of operas that anyone thinks about when they think about the art form. So just like, I don't think there's any sense in trying to get the Chopins of the world to write more symphonies, or to get the Beethovens of the world to write more operas. Like, they just naturally gravitate towards what they naturally gravitate. And so if David Fincher is feeling like doing more Netflix shows, I'm fine. I don't need him to do more movies. If somebody like James L. Brooks gravitates towards doing more producing more network TV shows, it's fine. I don't need him to do anything. I don't need him to do Netflix stuff. I don't need him to do movies. So I literally don't have any kind of preference. I don't think more highly of the Christopher Nolans or Quentin Tarantinos if they are exclusively directors for cinema, and I don't think less of somebody if they are exclusively directors for Netflix or something. So I honestly have next to no kind of preference in that situation. Now, I think if there are any viewers who are anime fans, they can probably the most easily understand this kind of viewpoint, because people who aren't anime fans, when they think about anime, it's overwhelmingly likely that they think about some of the anime released in movie form. So they might think of some Studio Ghibli movies or something like that. But then those who are anime fans, they predominantly tend to gravitate towards the serious form in anime. So basically it's establishing a precedent that you can sort of have a culture where, like, there's just no, like, there's no conflict with anime fans that they need to think more highly of Akira than they think of Cowboy Bebop, for instance, or that they would need to think more highly of Baccano than they are thinking of, I don't know, Spirited Away or something. Like, you can have it both ways. You don't need to choose between the two. So, I have, for the lack of a better word, kind of an anime fan like attitude towards these things, and I just can't help having it. So I personally do not see Netflix or any of those other streaming services. I don't see them as any kind of existential threat or any kind of I don't think of the people who only love cinema in film going experience. I don't think of them as the patricians, and then those who like Netflix shows or whatever. I don't think of them as the plebeians. So I just, like, because of that anime type reason, because of some of that classical music type reason, like, I don't think of the classical music that the people who write symphonies are the best, and then the Chopins of the world, they need to, be on some second tier. Like, I really don't view it like that. If anything, I appreciate the kind of shorter or mid-sized classical music probably more than I, appreciate any kind of 50-minute symphonies, which I rarely listen. I do watch opera, often enough that perhaps I would, if you have to pick a longer form classical music field, then I probably would come closer to gravitating towards opera. So to me, Netflix network shows they aren't any kind of existential threat. And I do think that the film scene probably can support both, but it's been mentioned in the air quite a lot the past decade, that this notion that the mid-size movie is dying, some are already calling it dead. So this idea that the only thing that cinemas will keep releasing, the only thing that production companies seem to think that the numbers make sense, the kind of gigantic blockbusters that are so expensive that it's difficult to fail with them. Not impossible, but that, as long as a movie costs a certain amount of money, you spend a certain amount of money marketing it, it leaves a mark. Even a flop leaves a mark in the kind of popular consciousness, and then there is kind of a brand build, and then you can keep reselling certain kind of licensing rights, whether it's TV rights, home video rights, streaming rights. Like, there are ways of recouping a brand, like recouping investment in a brand property, and the only way to really have a brand property is to have a massively expensive property. Either that it just costs a lot to produce, or that you make it into a brand by just having 100 million plus marketing budget. So the huge blockbuster stuff makes sense, and then the micro budget. So if we'll use the American scale, obviously what's micro budget in Finland and what's micro budget in America are different kind of conversations. But like, the kind of famous examples of Clerks by Kevin Smith, El Mariachi by Roberto Rodriguez, She's Gotta Have It by Spike Lee, Permanent Vacation or Stranger Than Paradise by Jim Jarmusch. Like, those kinds of movies, like, they're inexpensive enough that when you just get them in to the kind of distribution cycles, into the culture some way, it's difficult to fail when a movie only costs something like $6,000 or something. Now, obviously, some of those were closer to like 25,000 range, but really, like, even in Finland, those would be regarded, like, if you can make a movie with maxed out credit cards, I think anywhere it can be regarded as micro budget. So anyway, I think that the film culture is trending towards the kind of direction that the much maligned Academy Awards, maybe something like that alone is keeping the kind of mid-sized movie like Kramer versus Kramer, or something like Todd Hayes' Far From Heaven or Carol, or some movies like that. Like maybe something like the combination of having movie stars, having free publicity from the award tour and whatever, like, something like that is sort of the last citadel for the mid-size movie. And if that's removed, then the two natural options for the film culture is to gravitate towards the hugely expensive brand properties and then the kind of people who have some sort of maverick-like, risk-taking and love for the game, and who just somehow make things happen and make do with a small budget. Like, those seem to be the two lanes that those who, want to practice the kind of old model of cinema, those seem to be the two main alternatives. The award circuit and whatever's happening there is sort of keeping the mid-size movie still in play, but the paradigm is in the process of changing into something new. And I made a couple of videos that viewers didn't watch that much recently about some of the economic prospects around cinema. The crux of the argument in both of them is this idea that there is some sort of a critical mass, that if the things go beyond that point, it starts the kind of domino theory that if a lot of retailers start going out of business, if a lot of theaters start going out of business, the dominoes that start falling basically mean that much like there aren't that many, opera houses in provincial areas, there aren't that many symphony orchestras in provincial areas, the scene will just readjust to the kind of situation that only the metropolitan areas can provision for certain kind of infrastructure, and then that kind of limitation, if something like that would cut like 40% of the profits of the purely cinema going side, just the cinema side without any of the streaming or television stuff, like if cinema is already going through hard times with the current 100% provisioning, if they need to go with 60% provisioning with 40% loss of income, then obviously that will then create the kind of two-road paradigm. Well, that will kill the mid-size movie for the most part. Like, obviously, you will still probably be able to have some like Adam Sandler movies or something that they're treated like blockbusters, but they don't cost like blockbusters. Like, maybe something like that. But like, it's that kind of, if there is some sort of a dominoes falling paradigm shift that there's 40% of income because of infrastructural changes, then I see that as basically getting us to the new paradigm, which anyone who cares about more aesthetically, shall we say, elaborate kind of filmmaking, then obviously that kind of downshifting, unless you think that some sort of a total reboot with some new generation Jim Jarmuses, etc. If you think that something like that can do good, I'm not saying that that's a horrible idea, but certainly, well, I mean, when television came to the scene, that was the last time that there was that kind of 40% drop in profit, and it did bring forth the new wave period. So, like, there is a historical precedent to think that there's an aesthetic leap with lesser finances. Like, it's not at all possible, but to think that just because there's less money, that things will jump up. I mean, there's another historical precedent that I can show you, that when Finnish cinema had its golden age, as far as I'm concerned, the quality of the movies, the median quality of the movies were the highest that it's ever been, and filmmaking was the most profitable that it's ever been. And then there was a slow, like the profits fell off a cliff the more TV came to the scene. And certainly that didn't create any kind of generation of Jean-Luc Godard or Nagisa Oshima level talents in Finnish cinema. So it's not something that you can count on, but there's a possibility that if necessity is labeled as the mother of invention, then who knows, but that's something to consider. Now, do I think that film culture will stay the same if we, if the cinema-going market becomes more difficult, and we try to protect the overall culture by having three different markets next to one another, and that if the David Finchers of the world can't get mid-sized movies in cinemas, they get them into Netflix or something. Do I think that that's just as good? Well, no, I don't think that it's just as good, but, this conceivably enters the kind of beggars can't be choosers territory, in that, I don't think David Fincher's Netflix work is as good as his cinema work, but if he can't get cinema work effectively, then his Netflix work is better than nothing. So, that starts being the attitude. Now, then, if the viewer that I mentioned in the intro, he asked me, what do I think about the Finnish landscape in particular, that there's some, Finland's answers to those kind of streaming services and the libraries. What do I think about Finnish filmmakers flocking to them? I mean, I don't think anything. I don't think it moves the needle as far as our culture of visual storytelling is concerned. So, I would say that our film culture is already at zero, and it can't crash below zero. So, if the directors, instead of doing bad movies that nobody cares about, if they make bad miniseries that nobody cares about, I don't think it's dangerous or damaging or anything. Like, we're already at zero, it's pretty bad. Like, there's only two or three directors working in Finland right now that get any kind of international respect, and only a handful of more that get kind of regional respect. So I don't think miniseries, I don't think they make it better or worse. I'm pretty firmly on record saying that I think that digital video, I've said it in the past, and I'll say it again. I think that the difference between celluloid and digital video is much like the difference between the old recording techniques versus this new recording technique using overdubs. In that, if you take a Rolling Stone album like Exile on Main Street, or a Miles Davis album like Kind of Blue, there's a very specific kind of texture when the musicians are, as it were, playing live in the studio. It's difficult to explain the kind of spatial realities of them just being there at the same time. The music is just happening there in the moment. In that, with overdubs, if you record the different instruments individually, you sort of, there's this idea that it's mildly disorienting if you're seeing these hands at totally different. Like, that's what I get with overdubs, in that it's, I think, less clean than the Miles Davis old Rolling Stone side, where everything seems to be in perfect balance because it's in perfect balance in the live situation. But when you try to when you try to overstate this and you pull back on this, it's just, I don't think it sounds as good. And same thing with digital video. Not all digital video is doomed to look not good, much like not all overdubbing is doomed to sound not good. But when it's done kind of absent-mindedly and just done for convenience, what it doesn't sound like or what it doesn't look like is as great as the classics of the past, where there's no convenience. Like, when actors are asked about some project, what they usually say is that they just remember the waiting. Cinematographers and the key grips and whatever, just setting up the lights for hours. Like, sometimes it takes 2 hours to take a 20-second close-up or something. Like, the investment of time, money, and energy is the reason why the old stuff looks good. If somebody just had a handheld 16mm camera and they were just wobbling there in front of the actress with natural lighting, it wouldn't look good because of any kind of magic of film stock. Like, great artists needed to put their best foot forward to produce the greatness that is there in the best movies of the past. Like, if you watch some kind of bootleg Turkish Star Wars movie, if it's shot on celluloid, it certainly doesn't look like Lawrence of Arabia because of the lesser investment in the kind of qualities of texture in the image. Like, that level of old school excellence, it doesn't just happen. Like, dozens of people committed to it full time to produce the kind of best level. What folks in digital video do is that they just run through situation and, it looks whatever and it feels like whatever, and then audiences watch it and they're like whatever. And, the kind of how digital video allows people to just run through situations. That kind of investment in the convenience of the situation is what's problematic with these new releases, in that they don't sweat over the situations as much as people in the old school. Like, it's unfortunately just a size does matter kind of conversation, in that there is a size of the investment in time, investment in energy, investment in money that shows up in quality. It's not a question that there's some artist who just have some magic powers and they can do in 10 seconds what mediocrities would need 10 hours for. In that, the greatest artist working for something in 10 seconds is still just a doodle. Like, to make something look elaborate, you need the size of the investment in time, money, and energy. And if something is just done quickly, like it's not a talent question, it's a culture question. Like Jean-Luc Godard, like some of his movies, how should I say it neutrally? Some of his movies display his talent in a more elaborate manner than some of his other movies, because the kind of culture around the situation, fluctuated, and as that kind of culture fluctuated, like if there are Godard movies that are less good than some of his absolutely best work, it's not because he just, was hungover on the set and just couldn't access talent. What he couldn't access was the culture of having the highest quantitative investment to the qualitative outcome. Because sometimes Godard just felt like the culture of image, c'est a bourgeois preoccupation. Why should the filmmaker of the revolution care about the texture of the image? No. Monsieur, pardon, non. C'est a revolutionary movie here. No, this bourgeois stuff, please. So you are boring me. No. You are to be silent, s'il vous plaît. Okay? So this, you not talking about this no more. Okay? So if that was his attitude, then obviously that's not, one step away from greatness, because he was just acting like a strange person, and then he made some strange movies that, some diehard fans love, but others don't warm up to them the same way that they might for Le Mépris or Breathless or whatever. So anyway, like, obviously our contemporary directors, they aren't like Jean-Luc Godard in their stances, but they're kind of, on-set glibness that I theorized for late period Godard is sort of like, I'm saying it's kind of comparable. And again, there's just this kind of culture that if you want something to look stunning, there's an old school way of going about it that people aren't taking, which is why digital video is looking so bad. Like, honestly, I don't think I'm that hard to please. It's just that the work that people are turning in, it's just so not good that there's nothing positive to be said about it. Like, it applies to contemporary European cinema, it applies to contemporary European filmmaking. Like, what do you want me to say? That stuff won't last, it won't be cherished by anyone, not now, not in the future, because just the type of investment in it is the smallest possible one, and usually when you are the smallest possible something, it's just not, greatly significant to anyone. So that's kind of the problem in our contemporary film culture, be it in cinema or be it in a streaming service, library programming. So, again, I just don't know what to say about it. So, do I think that the landscape is changing? Yes, very slowly. I don't think very significantly. I just think that it's a percentage game. So we aren't like, when radio came to the scene, it didn't kill theater. When cinema came to the scene, it didn't kill radio. When television came to the scene, it didn't kill cinema. When internet came, it didn't kill television. It just reduced the percentage of the market share of a given field. So, if cinema once had a 70% market share and now it's crashing to 20%, then obviously it shows up somewhere, and perhaps the quantity of movies will dip, perhaps the quality of movies will dip, whether we're talking about in Finland or in United States or globally, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't think it's problematic if, if we want movies to be 70%, but it's 20%, I don't think the 20% market share in and of itself is problematic. I think what is problematic is that, in every era there's been kind of not good mainstream fodder, but there's been a credible alternative for it. And right now, our alternative just isn't particularly credible because, we have bland, uninteresting stuff in the mainstream, but the alternative is sometimes even worse because at least the mainstream stuff, for the most part, like whatever you say about, if Adam Sandler or Jennifer Aniston are in a movie, like just go with it or something, like whatever you say about it, it's coherent. It's something that you can, like, from moment to moment, you might take an issue with something, you might think that things are insufficient, but at least they are there in a kind of like a correctly harmonized version. But then, it's like somebody singing a bad song decently, but then in the kind of alternative sphere, it's like somebody singing a bad song badly. Like, yeah. It's just like, I might be trying, like, I'm actually trying to be nice on this channel. I try to be nicer than I might sort of naturally be in my private life. In that, when I really don't like something, I just, like, I don't make an effort to, like, say, a recent release. If I feel like I care more about its position in film culture than the people who made it, I'm not gonna try, but I am trying to speak politely on this channel about everything, but like, it's our film culture, it is in pretty bad shape. So that's why whether cinema, whether its market share is 70%, whether it's 20%, whether there's X amount of movies being produced a year or 10% of that, I don't think those are the significant conversation. What is the significant conversation is that the alternative starts being credible again. The way that it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, what have you. Like, we just, we need, like, what's essential is that there's some amount of great movies being produced. It doesn't need to be, it doesn't need to be movies on the level of The Godfather or Casablanca. It doesn't need to be box office successes on the level of Gone with the Wind or Titanic. What we need is something for the film culture in the contemporary scene to sort of hang its hat on, in a manner of speaking. So, like, there needs to be something, anything in the form of a contemporary success. The way that the film culture in the 60s could rally around, say, François Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard. The way that the film culture in the 1970s could rally around Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Brian De Palma, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Bernard Bertolucci, so many others. Like, the way that the 80s film culture could rally around whoever it is that they did. Like, we just need something to kind of, like, the scene is kind of diffuse and trivial and just kind of, nothing for nothing for nobody type condition. And what we need is a certain kind of a through line for those who care about, well, I don't entirely like this expression, but quality for quality's sake. So, in other words, like, there are sports fans who just want to watch, say, good football games. There are, I don't know, epicures who just want to, fine and dine at a nice restaurant or something. Like that the culture would have something that's adding significance to orbit around. Like the film culture is in need of something like that. And if something like Stranger Things or something like that in Netflix or something can do what Jean-Luc Godard did in 1959, then I have no problems with it. I don't really have problems where it might come. Whether it's in Finland or France, whether it's in Canada or Australia, whether it's in, Taiwan or Paraguay. Like, I don't really care where the kind of, a work that kind of puts into focus things for the contemporary film scene come. I don't really care about that. I don't care whether it's cheap or expensive, whether it's intellectual or popular. What we just need is some sort of a more credible start for a movement, for cinema to start taking the kind of steps to kind of add the kind of cultural connective elements that help people add significance to the culture more easily. And then obviously the more people there are wishing to add significance to the culture, the greater the culture grows with time and energy, and then that's again the kind of size matters, investment, quantitative investment showing up as quality eventually. So I think that's what we need. Now, hopefully I answered the question somewhat correctly about what it is that I think about streaming and filming and whatever. And hopefully my impromptu Godard accent was, halfway on point. I tried a French accent earlier. I'm not 100% satisfied with my French accent because, there's this fine balance between, Jean Cocteau has a famous line saying that one must know just how far to go too far. A lot of people who are trying to do a British accent, when it's not good, they always go too far. And same thing with French accent. Although people are not as discriminatory towards, like, people tend to accept bad French accents more than they accept bad British accents, although I don't think that people should. Which is why I have the same standards for French accent as people have for British accent. So, just slightly off topic point, but sometimes the French accent sometimes is better than at other times. So you person, what's in this, you understand? Huh? But the trick is that you must be a certain kind of subtle with the accent because you don't want this situation that the people watching, look at this ham. This ham is overdoing everything. She's like British cuisine. Oui, they can say British cook anything. The French people, they are not convinced at this at all. Oui. Person watching the video, you are now invited to this kind of French sphere. Oui, this is how we are doing these things on this channel. Oui, c'est a petit difficult verb, oui, but we are the French people, we are handling this situation in an impeccable manner, comme d'habitude. Oui, c'est not something that is newsworthy, but we will keep reminding you of this nonetheless. Oui, c'est ça, prérogative. Oui, is that an intelligible verb? Huh? So I feel like that was a better French accent. I was kind of more, warm for it. But I don't know if I want to try and launch a British one in these videos. But yeah, I'll say, since I'm kind of freewheeling off topic, that if folks want to suggest, material for videos, they can do that. Because if I type a lengthy response in the comments, it actually almost takes as long to type the comment, or to type multiple comments, I should say, than it does to do this kind of video. So that's why it's okay to suggest, but the problem isn't so much that can I be bothered to do a video, but do I seriously feel like I have something to say about a given subject? Because I mean, I don't know whether I think that I'm a person who has strong opinions. I would rather phrase it that I have specific opinions in certain situations, but then, I mean, that only goes as far as it goes. But anyway, I think that this was it for this video. I thank everyone for watching, and that's all for now. Bye bye.